Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I ended up in this situation.
Welcome back, all of you great runners. For those of you that don't know, I'm Dustin Hall, your everyday mid to the back of the pack ultra runner. And today, I'm looking forward to sharing with you my experience at the Wildstrubel 108k by UTMB. And I can definitely tell you with confidence that I got my money's worth out of this race, to the fact that UTMB might actually owe me a check for all of the time that I spent with the sweepers out there on the course in dead fucking last. Let's talk a little bit about what this race is before we get into all of the great details. So this was the first edition of the Wildstrubel. It's part of the new UTMB World Series, one of the 20-some races where you can get running stones. Ultimately, I will tell you that this was a replacement for my dream race of CCC. With the changes, I knew that I could no longer lottery get in, and I needed a race to replace it. So looking at the options, Wildstrubel gave 108k, so a little bit longer, but it also gave roughly 20,000 feet of positive gain in 5 major passes, which goes along with CCC. And let's not forget that this is nestled in the center of Switzerland in the Alps with some breathtaking landscapes. Now, my lead up to this race, I'll say that my training block was actually really good. I did a lot of things right, got in good mileage, incorporated a lot of hill work, even got to Utah for 3 weeks to spend time in the Wasatch, and where I would spend time above 8,000 feet, which the race would barely crest that a couple times, but above 8,000 feet, getting lots of vertical gain. I would regularly get comments while going up Mount Timpanogos for the second or third time from people that I had passed or were now coming down that I was outright crazy. But I was dedicated to making sure that this race happened. So a great lead up. I got to Crans, Montana about a week early, where the start of the race is. Didn't do anything too crazy that week. Went for some good 30 to 60 minute runs, some hiking, just really acclimatizing to the local weather, elevation, food, water. And this was really key because actually the second day that I got there, myself and my son, we developed some kind of issue. Lots of sinus drainage, raspy voice, but I still had several days to work that out. Also during that time, did get to do the touristy things, take the gondola to top of mountains, see part of the course, and head over to what would actually be one of the first major checkpoints. And I'm going to go ahead and apologize for the rest of the video. I'm going to butcher these towns' names, but Luckerbad, they have what they call a thermal. They created a big, almost like water park, slides and pools and jets and a spa with a natural thermal spring where the water comes out to about 90 degrees. So did that 2 or 3 days before the race, really relaxed, got things worked out. Early. So race day. The race started at 9 a.m. I think I got up about 5. My plan was to sleep a little bit longer, but all of you have been there. Race day, I just couldn't sleep. So I got up, got a good shower, stretched, ate a really hearty breakfast. Not so much of what I was used to. That was one of the issues, just couldn't find the normal foods shopping there. But I did have my banana, oatmeal, some coffee, Powerade, and those things, and a few jelly donuts for a few easy calories there to carb up. Got on the bus, headed over, got to the start line maybe about 30 minutes early, and I was already back of the pack in the queue. I have to say that the race did an amazing job of hyping everyone up for the start. The atmosphere was absolutely electric and a lot of fun. I know a lot of races attempt to do that, but UTMB nailed it. They have that formula down. We get taken off. I settle in towards the back of the pack, a nice easy pace. I know that it's gonna be a long day plus, to make this loop. Immediately after probably about a mile and a half, we hit the normal type of choke point that you think about, get queued up in it, and start working away. And making sure that some of the flatter or smoother sections that probably were runnable, that I moderated myself during those. I didn't want to overextend, knowing that about 15 or 20 miles in, started some of the biggest climbing. So work through this beautiful landscape starts to appear.
How far was it so?
Oh, yeah. And I make my way over to Luckerbad. I only make it to that aid station with probably about 10 minutes to spare before the first cutoff. It's okay. I knew that this one was gonna be tight as I would start slower. I knew that there was gonna be that bottleneck overall. And in the way the race was designed is that the cutoffs would gradually increase, giving more time. So got through there and started up to the Gemini Pass. First major climb, ton of switchbacks, very vertical. It's not smooth, a lot of stairs built in, uneven. And this is where I really started to encounter my first big problem. I don't know what it was that I had at the aid station, but my stomach went south. I ended up throwing up multiple times, couldn't keep water down. It made it really tough. And that was my first interaction with one of the sweepers. As they were coming up, clearing the course, they just kept asking if I was okay, if I needed anything. But I continually moved forward. They let me know it was okay. I still had time. And I eventually made that pass. I made it to the top, to the next aid station. Not sure how much time I had there, but my whole goal was to get out of there as fast as possible because I know I had ate up time. But this is also where I got the first view of the Wildstrubel Massive with the glacier and the snow on it. and it was awesome. It was inspiring. After probably 10 or 15 minutes, finally started getting some water down, got some calories in, and I started picking up the pace. Started clicking off some good miles on some very runnable terrain around one of the most majestic alpine lakes that I've seen. So worked down through there, was doing well, but this feeling better quickly negated as a new sweeper picked up. And he did not speak English. I'll be honest, he's one of the things that I didn't like about the race. He was always on my heels. He'd pick up a flag, a marker, and he'd be right back on top of me, driving me forward. And I really didn't like this, because as we got out of that runnable section, there were some pretty gnarly, steep descents. I wanted to get some of this GoPro footage, and I'll say that I didn't get nearly as much as I wanted throughout the whole race, because I was cutting those cutoff times very close, but he just made me feel very uncomfortable trying to get down, especially with exposed cliffs and the terrain being wet. Nonetheless, I said, Fido, fuck it, drive on.
Still being chased by the chop shop, but we're now, a marathon in, so whatever that works out to.
Kept going, worked through there, and eventually made it to the first major life station. This is where my crew met me in the town of, I believe it was Kandersteg. Again, probably butchering it, no big deal. Came in, it was obvious that I was in last place. The race official came over, they're like, are you planning on going on? I said yes. Met up with my wife, who done a tremendous job of getting things changed out. She helped me address a small blister, the only blister of the whole race, just a small one on my heel. Got that taped up, got some food. But before I could get my water bottles filled back up that final time and get some calories in those, they began tearing down the life base. So my wife had to frantically search to be able to just fill up my water bottles. I get out of there probably 5 minutes before the cutoff, and I head on. At this point, I know that I'm starting to head into the long night, but that's okay. I've spent lots of time out navigating at night through the military. I've done a lot of night runs. During this training block, I actually did a lot of my runs after 8 p.m., after I put my kids to bed. So I was very comfortable with it, and I just started picking it apart, tackling what I could and moving along very well. This was also probably one of the steepest climbs, if I remember correctly, during it. It was a very exposed mountain. Again, lots of switchbacks, but it was all broken rock in this time, but it was very easy to navigate to get up to the top. I remember sitting there working my way up, and you could just see forever over the valley to the next mountain. And as the moon was coming up, there was also a thunderstorm working its way through. You could see the lightning just roaring. And to me, that was a little bit of a sign that needed to pick it up, as I didn't want to get caught on top of this with lightning. At this point, at the top, like 20-mile-per-hour sustained winds that dropped the temperature probably somewhere from 35 down into the teens. As I'm making my way down the backside in this loose shell, winding these switchbacks, that's when the rain finally hit. I met that goal. Luckily, this rain was not accompanied with lightning and thunder, but it did leave me on a very exposed place, trying to get out my rain jacket and get it on, some gloves because it was cold and had been sweating, but got it on, continued to work down. I would say that towards the bottom of this descent was maybe the hardest place overall to navigate at night, and it wasn't that the course markings were bad. You could see them visually where they were at. It's just the fields had a lot of crisscrossing paths, and you weren't sure which direct one that you were supposed to stay on. Many of them did link back up into themselves, but some of them veered way off. So it did take some time to navigate through that. And eventually that brought me into the next life base to see my crew again. This was at Adelboden, and this was definitely a pivot point in my race. I'd been running with a gentleman from Los Angeles for a while. We'd been passing each other back and forth, and when we came in, I thought we were both gonna go on it, and we were told that we had 1 minute to get through the aid station. So we grabbed what we could, got through, and filled things up on the other side with our crew, which was still allowed. They told me there was no issue with that. But unfortunately, he decided not to go forward. So I was once again back of the pack, by myself, headed back into the night after a very, very tight cutoff, to the point that the race crew actually called the main headquarters to make sure that I scanned through and I could keep going. So I got really worried at that point. But they were all nice. They let my wife fill up the things that needed. And I got back out there. I got through the town, and eventually, before I started climbing, it's when I broke all of my gear down and switched out to what I needed. This next section here, as I was working through it, it was actually not a really steep climb. It wasn't a technical climb. It was continuous, but it was probably one of the nicer passes going through, other than at the top when the wind picked up again. At the top, there it was kind of a restaurant as it met up with a gondola, a ski lift, I'm not real sure. Got to go in there I probably spent 5 to 10 minutes. I had some broth, filled up the water bottles, got warm, layered up a little bit more, and took off. After coming out of there, just like the ascent, the descent was pretty runnable. I clicked off quite a few normal easy pace miles, and I mean, at this point, I'm probably somewhere around 35 miles in with 10,000 feet of climbing in my legs. So clicking off 9-minute miles felt really good for a while. Worked down and eventually hit some more fields that were a bit muddy from the rain. Still raining at this point. And I took 2 or 3 good falls, but it was not enough that anything hurt me. Just mud on the shorts, maybe a bruise on the ass, I don't know, but nothing major. So kept driving on, getting to the town of Link, and I have close to 40 minutes at this aid station. So it was great. My wife got me broth, she got me Coke, pasta. I changed out my shirt in my secondary layer to something dry that I hadn't sweated through, organized, got my calories lined back up, got everything that I needed except changing out the GoPro battery. I did charge my watch, did charge my phone during it, spent maybe 30 minutes there and got back out. Again, I'm the only one except for the sweeper that would occasionally catch up for me, and I headed from that point into what I would say is the longest climb of the race, over, I think it was somewhere around 1,200 meters, a little over 3,200 feet climbing, whatever that math works out to be. And The sweeper on this section was a really nice guy. We talked about he ran ran UTMB, different marathons. He only needs one more of the major marathons in the world. It was a good conversation. It was actually pretty uplifting overall. And as we worked our way up, he was telling me about the local area, like how the cows were starting to come down for the winter. It'd be snowing soon. And we just connected. It was nice. And we eventually hit that last climb, again, like 1,200, 1,300 meters, something like that. Steady. I don't think any of it was too steep, but switchbacks, stairs, and this is where I actually dropped the sweeper because I passed a couple people. And I will tell you, while I was still in good spirits, there was a struggle going on, and it was becoming obvious that everyone was on that knife's edge of make or break, especially looking at that time. So I work through it, finally make the pass, start heading down, and it's muddy, shell-type terrain and wet. This hurt my spirits a little bit, I will be honest, because you couldn't keep a good pace because of all of the sliding, and didn't want to get injured with, we'll call it like 10 miles left in the race or so. So just worked through it. I put music on at this point. It really helped. I don't normally listen to music at all. I just tackle it. But then going forward, as I'm making it completely down off, I can see the dam, which is the last checkpoint. I know from there I've got a little over 2 hours from the cutoff to go, I'm going to say like 7 miles, a little over 10K. But as I'm going down, this was steep. My legs were shot, and I mean, I was descending at probably at 17 or 18 minute pace. It was very steep. Runnable. I'm sure the front of the pack flew down that, and it was glorious, but I'm left going, how do I even train for this? So good for all of those people. Make it down to the lake and the dam. I've got 30 minutes before I have to be out of here, so I spend a good 10 minutes. Shout out to this aid station. Complete shout out to them. They were wonderful. They announced that I was coming in. Every worker there came up and asked me multiple times what they could get me. And even their kids came up that spoke no English to try to help. I probably had four cups of Coke, 4 of broth, some bread, and filled up my water bottles. I was out, only spent about 15 minutes there. And I headed into the last 7 miles, which from my map recon, I thought was going to be mainly downhill, and I was wrong. There was a lot of climbing still left in it, probably close to another 1,000 feet, and it made me continuously second guess myself if I was headed in the right direction. I'm like, did I get switched around? Am I on the 50K course now? Like, what's going on? Like, this doesn't feel right. And also, this was probably some of the most beautiful running of the course, but I wasn't in the mental state to enjoy it. Massive bridge, outcroppings, just panoramic views. And I also started running into what I will say, because now we're 24 hours in, over 24 hours in. We're looking at the heart of a Saturday, running into all the recreational hikers and tourists that were clogging up some of these paths and slowing me down. So I'm watching my watch. I know the distance that's left, and I'm doing the math. Like, mentally, I've got maybe a 15-minute window at this point to cross that finish line. And with 3 to 4 miles left, the last thing happened that really set me off. One of the UTMB volunteers that was on a bike with a GoPro was setting up there, and as I passed him, he said, "Good job, keep going, it's only pride at this point." And he insinuated essentially I wasn't going to make it. And that lit a fire underneath me, and anything that was slightly runnable, I was running it. So instead of finishing in 29 hours and 20 minutes, I picked it up. I passed one other person that I thought might have a chance of making it, so I was no longer the DFL. I was second. I had that podium on the last side. Picked it up and shaved close to 15 minutes off that estimate, and I came in a little over 29 hours. And to me, I really got to accomplish a dream here, and that's from the time that I thought about doing a UTMB event years ago. I wanted to cross the line with my family, and I got to do just that. And it was a magical event. They're too young, they will probably never remember it, but I will never forget it. So that was my race experience. Just recapping, the things that I really enjoyed about the race were the people. There were good moments in there, like my buddy from LA that didn't keep going on, tremendous aid station workers that just had hearts of gold. Even the main station, and I didn't mention this, there were several times that sweeper called in that we cleared whatever area, and he was still with runner 443, which was me, and I'd hear back something in French that I didn't understand, but I did understand the next part. Good luck, Dustin. And it was just heartwarming. It really was. That they wanted me to finish knowing what little of a chance I had based on the times I was putting up. So the people made it tremendous. The course markings were great. Aid stations, when I made it in, were very plentiful. Like anything that you could think of. Real food, broth, cola. Tremendous job. The few things that I would have changed. Those couple sweepers that were pushing me that just made me feel uncomfortable. I still had time at that point. I wasn't that deep in the tank. They were just wanting to get in and out of there. Second, that guy on the bike that made the comment that made me feel like I wasn't going to make it and I might as well give up. Those are the only two things I would change. Overall, I'll tell you my final thoughts when it comes to this race. I find myself, one, very emotional. There was lots of highs. There was lots of lows that I don't know that I will ever be able to articulate. And especially because I just can't find the words of what that experience was like. For all of you that have done something like this, you'll understand what I mean. But I would encourage you, push your limits. Find a race like this that you're going to be a little bit uncomfortable with, but that means something to you. And have a great adventure along the way. Smile. Be the happy runner. I was the happy runner. This is a picture of that my daughter and my wife drew on my leg before to make sure that I smiled. Other people smiled. And even at one point in one of these beautiful landscapes, I was singing "The Hills Are Alive" with music to bring a smile to people. So the race beats my greatest expectation. I thank you for watching. If you haven't, go ahead and like and subscribe. And if you're interested in what my gear and pack look like for this race, make sure you stop back by. I plan on having that out in the next few days as well. Thank you. You just got to keep on lacing up, running, and running happy.